Well, my name is Sam. I'm the Partnerships and Communications Manager at Fairygodboss. Fairygodboss is the largest career community for women. Our mission is to improve the workplace for women by increasing transparency, and we offer a variety of free resources like anonymous company reviews, job listings, articles, virtual recruiting events, and more to help women succeed throughout their careers. Before we get things started, we are going to be trying to take questions at the end. So if you want to hold them and ask them later, we will get to as many as possible. In addition, this webinar will be recorded and sent out in a follow-up email. So if you missed anything or you want to watch it back at any time, you'll have the ability to do so. Here with me today is Lisa Lewis, career change coach and the founder of Career Clarity Method. Lisa helps multi-passionate and ambitious individuals create the careers they've been wishing for. She received her coaching certification as one of only 7 coaches in the world trained in the pivot method. Clients praise her ability to see through their excuses, champion their possibilities, and give resume reviews that are like purifying hellfire. Her words, not mine. Thanks for being here today, Lisa. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Sam. It is a pleasure to be here. And thank you to all of you who are showing up live. And thank you to all of you who are watching and listening to the recording. It says so much about who you are and what matters to you that you're thinking about future-proofing your career and setting yourself up for success in a longitudinal, strategic, sustainable kind of way. So let's dive into it, shall we? First of all, thank you very much for being here. So our learning objectives for today are going to be these core things. Number 1, talk about why career pathing is so different for us than it is for our parents or grandparents' generations. Number 2, talk about a new model for thinking about career pathing in an uncertain economy and world. And number 3, know how to see where innovation and changes are coming in the market for your particular role or your particular sector so you can prepare for economic ups and downs and future-proof your career. And at the very end, we'll talk about how to pair this information with some practical, tactical action steps so that you can actually make it happen. So if that is important to you today, I know it is super tempting when you're joining a Zoom meeting to have your email up in one tab or Instagram up in one tab. But if I can convince you to log off of that stuff so you can be 100% here for yourself in the future that you want to create, and so that you can be participating with some questions as we go, I think you'll get more out of it, and it'll be a more rich experience for everybody who is showing up. So if you have not already, it would be great to have you chime in the chat box. And you can see here, if you are on your computer, you should see a black band like this that has a little box that says chat. And then when you click on it, you'll get this box where you can select here to say hello to everyone. Or if you're joining from your phone, at the very bottom, there should be a black bar that has a little box that says chat. Then you can go ahead and click on that. But I would love to hear a little bit more about who is joining us and where you're joining us from. So hello to Jennifer from Austin. Thanks for being here. Kim and Amarillo, thank you for being here too. We got a lot of good Texas representation. I like it. Marley, thank you for the note. Charisse, hi. Debbie, good morning from Santa Cruz. Hi, Anne. Shannon, Lara, Nicole, Sharon from DC. Awesome to meet you. I'm actually going to talk about my time in DC here in a moment. Hey, fellow Lisa. Hello, Elena. I'm going to be looking down because I've got the chat up here on my phone so I can make sure to be keeping up with you guys in real time. Hello to Kara. We got a lot of good Texas representation here. Hello to Rebecca from Pittsburgh. Looks like everybody is having the chat box work beautifully, and it is wonderful to get to know all of you and have you all here live. So I'm asking you to share who you are and haven't really shared a whole lot about who I am yet. Beyond being the little brown-haired person on the left here and the person on the right, I am saying hello from behind the slides to tell you that I am a recovering perfectionist, obsessive learner, fellow overachiever to all of y'all here who are thinking about future-proofing your careers, an English breakfast tea lover, which I have in this giant mug over here, a mug the size of my head, an INTJ, and a definite Ravenclaw. But beyond all that, I'm a career change coach who is obsessed with helping create a happier, healthier workforce. And I've had the honor of supporting more than 500 people and making big, bold, badass career transitions. So in working with 500 people, you see a thing or two about trends that are happening to people, stumbling blocks, things that people are running up against that you want to be able to help support them in getting through. And that was one of the reasons why I wanted to develop this workshop and bring it to Fairygodboss. And so I want to start us out with talking about future-proofing our careers with this question of what do you want to be when you grow up? And let me know in the chat box if you ever were posed to this question throughout your life, particularly in your wee young impressionable years when you were a kiddo. Anybody hear this sort of question? I'll check in here. Sydney says yes, for sure. Hi to Nia and Leah. Oh, definitely from Becca. Elena says all the time. Sharice says all the time. Yeah, this is a pretty common question for grown-ups to tend to ask little kiddos as a way of trying to create a conversation and create connection, all this great stuff. Yasmin says, I naturally said I wanted to do what my mom did. Yeah, that's such a great point. We're actually going to be talking about a piece of that as we go here. So it sounds like a ton of you have heard this question. And Zypher, I love that you're saying, I still don't know what I want to be. That is perfectly normal and makes sense. And we're actually going to speak to that a little bit today too. Because this question here, I'm going to throw out a controversial opinion, which is, it's a crap question. And here's why it's a crap question. This sweet picture of professional Barbie Lisa that you're seeing on the page here was from the very early parts of my own career. I'm currently living in Denver, Colorado, working for myself, but back in that day, I was working in Washington, D.C. at a nonprofit. And when I first got hired on at that nonprofit, I was what they called the new media associate, because they essentially needed somebody to be their web designer, web developer, but they'd never really had any website before, any online presence before. They were just starting to come around to the idea that social media was a thing. And so they brought me on to come and do this job. And had we asked Lisa, little Lisa, 10, 15 years before, what she wanted to do with her life, she probably would not have said, I want to be a new media associate. Because in the span of that time, that job didn't even exist, right? For most of us, I imagine, guessing the age range of folks who are on here today, for most of you, when you were growing up, social media wasn't a thing. You couldn't do Facebook, Twitter hadn't been invented yet. So to have asked little Lisa, what do you want to be when you grow up, would have been really, really limiting. And I think even asking those of us today in this era of life, that question can be incredibly limiting, because it presumes that what exists now is the only thing that's ever going to exist. But this question consumes us and defines us so much and makes it really hard to expand our thinking, to recognize that the jobs that we might be doing 20 years from now, 10 years from now, even 5 years from now, don't even exist yet. So I would like to believe that you are all here today because you want a more empowering, helpful answer to that question, or maybe even a better set of questions to be asking yourself to take the reality into account that we are living in an ever-evolving economy. Brandy, I love that you say, I joke that I want to be an astrophysicist. And Leah, I hear you that you don't feel totally grown up yet. And I think that that question of what do you want to be when you grow up presupposes there's one right answer. You can already know it when you're little, and you're going to do that one thing for the rest of your days. But what we are about to talk about today is a much more agile, responsive, and contemporary way of thinking about career pathing. Because this ain't your daddy's economy or job market, right? 7 years ago, the pace of innovation in the market was slower because resources were less abundant and easily moved, right? The internet as a concept didn't exist 50, 60 years ago. So the reality that our parents grew up in, or our parents' parents grew up in, is one where things couldn't and didn't happen the same way that they happen today. So careers back in that day, when they were getting advice and receiving counsel from other people, used to be something you did for your whole time in the workforce, the thing that you went to school for, if you even went to school. I could have a whole separate soapbox about how the economy and the job market has shifted dramatically because we have this expectation and pressure that everybody's got to go to college. And careers used to be considered to be stable and linear. You get your one job, you hang out in that job for 40 years, you retire with your pension, right? Huge things have been shifting in the world. Obviously, we know that's not the playing field that we are operating in, unless some of you are teachers in specific districts in the public school system that still have pensions and still have these things, and that's a model that you want to opt into. But for the majority of us, the model and the economy has shifted, and we are working with a totally new playing field. So Toto, we're not in Kansas anymore. The rules of the game have changed, and technology advances have created huge revolutions in how and what work gets done. So we now have to think about our career paths as constantly changing, likely to be unrelated to your undergrad degree, and having a certain amount of uncertainty and unpredictability to them, which if you were brought up around social norms or around people who are perpetuating the idea that your career should be the one thing that you do from your 21st birthday until your 65th birthday, this sort of a new reality feels really uncomfortable and a little bit scary. And so we're going to talk about a strategy to help you manage some of that uncertainty and some of the fear around it to feel as empowered and in control of what's happening in an inherently uncertain playing field as possible. So, like I was talking about before, the job you could be doing even 2 or 3 years from now may not even exist yet. Is there anybody, let me know via the chat, is there anybody who is on our session today who works in digital media, digital marketing, social media marketing, digital analytics? Anybody who works in a capacity in that way, where your job may very well not have existed 2 or 3 years ago, and the role that you could be moving into is changing at that fast of a pace. I'll go ahead and check in the chat box here. Anybody who has social media or online marketing as a piece of what they're doing as part of their role? Leah says, yes, all. Yes, all content all the time. Sheila says, yes to digital marketing. Sharice says, yes. Yeah, absolutely. And even for those of you who are not working directly in a digital marketing-y style field, you probably have been feeling the waves of how technology changes have been shifting what you're doing in your own work and the needs in your own work. So let me ask you, just pausing for a moment, how does trying to navigate a career path in this new economy with this uncertainty, with some of this instability, and without being able to predict out what your future job could be, how does that make you feel? Is it the sort of thing that makes you feel excited for a challenge, excited by the possibility? Is it something that makes you feel a little bit nervous or scared or unprepared? Is it something that makes you angry because you were told the economy was going to be one way and it has not turned out to be that one way? Elisa says anxious. Yeah, I hear ya. Focus says super nervous and unprepared. I'm too young to be old. I love that. Kay Larson says extremely uncomfortable because I want to be an income earner. Yeah, we're going to talk about that, how to tell where some of the high value places in the market are. Sharice says unprepared and anxious. Becca says nervous. Sydney says paralyzed by the number of choices. I hear you. We're going to talk about that too. Kay Kobo says anxious and nervous. Ella says excited and willing to fail to learn. That's an awesome mental model, Ella. And we're going to talk about how to help some of the other folks who are listening and watching this get into a place where they can feel a little hint more of that excitement too. Yasmin saying, feel like a guinea pig on a wheel. Yeah, and Boren says the control side of me says it's not okay because there's no way to plan or prepare. Victoria says trapped. Debbie says concerned. Yeah, all these ways of feeling are totally legitimate and make sense. And if we let those emotions and those experiences control us, control our thinking, control our decision-making, control our choices, it's going to feel really, really uncomfortable to be in the working world for however many years you have left, whether it's 5 years left or 35 years left. So Jenny Blake, business strategist and author, says, if change is the only constant we can be relying on in this world, let's get better at it. So is everybody ready here to start learning some mental models for how to navigate change and feel like you're actually, dare I say, good at change? If we are going to be diving into getting better at navigating change, we've got to think about 2 new mindsets for success. Mindset number 1 is that there's no such thing as a forever job anymore. It's an outdated mental model that's not going to work for 90% of us, and that's okay. That is not a personal failing on your part. That does not mean that you messed up in college. That doesn't mean that you are defective because you're not like our parents' generation or grandparents' generation. It just means that the world is shifting and we can shift with it, and there doesn't have to be a value judgment on that. Second mindset for success is that we need to be constantly prepared to pivot or get pivoted. And thinking about our future self's employment is our current self's responsibility. And sort of to the point that, who was it, Ella was making, there are 2 different ways that you can feel about this. You can feel nervous and uncomfortable and scared, about being responsible in your current day for your future self's employment and possibilities. Or you can lean into it as being part of the challenge, part of the interest of being human and getting to grow, right? Because for people who follow Tony Robbins, he always says something to the effect of, if you're not growing, you're regressing. If you're not growing, you're dying. And while I don't know that I would take such an extreme way of looking at things, continuing to be orienting yourself towards growth, possibility, opportunity, and creation is a way that can really equip you to feel like you can take this in stride, and where pivots, when you are actively choosing to make a change, or getting pivoted when something happens, you get downsized, laid off, fired, somebody in your family gets sick and you need to quit your job to go and be with them, that you have given yourself as much preparation and as many tools as possible to navigate that with grace. So if you are the sort of person who loves this kind of mindset work and mental model work and you want to go deep with it, I've got an ebook on my website for you that you might be interested in. So if you head to getcareerclarity.com, you can get your copy of the Roadmap to a Fulfilling Career, where we dive into lots of good mindset work. But what we are going to talk about for today here is that new, agile, responsive mental model for navigating instability in your career and instability in the job market, which is called, I'll do a drum roll on my desk here, the pivot method. How many people, go ahead and let me know in the comments here or in the chat box, how many people here have heard of the pivot method? And if this book is ringing a bell for you, even better. The pivot method is Jenny Blake's creation, co-opting an idea from the world of Silicon Valley and startups, where pivot is a word that has some baggage with it. Pivot means, okay, your first way of doing your market entry for your startup didn't work, so you have to pivot and reorganize your assets and figure out something else. And Jenny grabbed that term and she brought it into a personal level mental model that we can be using to navigate career changes with grace and ease and elegance. Kay Larson says, yes, I have heard of the pivot method. Awesome. Zypher says, I have not heard of it. Beautiful. I'm so excited to get to teach you about it here. One of my coaching certifications is in the pivot method, and I got that back in 2016. And the methodology that's presented in the book, and if you haven't read the book and you're a book person, I would say totally get your hands on the book. It's a fabulous one. But the methodology that's presented in it can be really, really helpful for this future-proofing idea. So I want to walk you through the different stages of it to show you how you can use this for thinking more strategically about career pathing for yourself. So the pivot method that Jenny has put together has 4 core phases to it. We'll walk through each one of these phases on their own. First of all, you start the pivot method in the plant stage. And the plant stage is when you notice what's working, what's feeling good, and the things that are creating momentum and excitement and interest in your life and in your work. So if you are in a job and you're feeling nervous that you might get pivoted, right? The economy might change around you. You think there might be some automation coming. Planting and thinking about, okay, well, what is working for me? What's joyful for me? What are the things that I'd love to have in my next job? Is a fabulous and important place to start. We think about this plant phase as quite literally being like a plant and growing roots, creating a really stable system of knowing what's true about you and your gifting and your capabilities that then can allow for you to grow and expand and move into different directions, right? The more thoughtfully you've been creating a root system for yourself, the easier it's going to be to create pivots grounded in who you are and what's been working. But I'll go back here for a second to the plant piece here, because in addition to creating that beautiful, healthy, juicy root system of what's working, what do I like, what would I like to keep in my next role, and all the self-awareness and the grounding in the present and the past that gives you, the plant stage also has a really important component of thinking about the future and the vision for what it is that you might like to do next, places you might want to grow next, opportunities you might want to be exposed to that you haven't been exposed to yet, whether that's a new project, whether that is a new industry, whether that's a new role. And it's sort of taking the very rooted here and now and the possibility, sort of pie in the sky, big picture vision clouds piece, and starting to pull them together. Because gathering all of those breadcrumbs and gathering all those data points about what's working and what you want are really critical to figuring out how you're going to navigate the evolutions and changes in front of you to figure out what could be next. So plant is the first stage. The second stage in navigating a pivot gracefully is to be scanning the environment out in front of you for opportunities. So Jenny in the book talks about this as being a little bit of a basketball metaphor. So when you are a basketball player and you got the ball and you're trying to look for some place to pass to, visually, you're not looking down at the floor, you're not looking at the ball, you've got your eyes up on the horizon scanning to see, okay, where are the other players on my team, who's open, who's a good shot, who could I send the ball to, so that you can see what's out there, right? So if we think of planting being the looking inward piece, scanning is the turning inward to outward piece to start to see what else is possible and looking for the opportunities that are out there that you might be intrigued by or interested in. Also, I got to get up on my soapbox knowing this is Fairygodboss and say it was so freaking hard to find animated GIFs of female basketball players to use in this freaking presentation. So if any of you are female basketball players or support female basketball players, you should make some content and put it online because there's such a need for it. Anyways, end soapbox. Taking us into phase 3 of the pivot method. Once you've been scanning the world for opportunities around you, the next stage is that you want to go into the pilot phase. And this is where you scanned for opportunities and you saw a couple that you said, that's sort of interesting to me. I would be intrigued in growing in that direction. That sort of seems to fit the vision and the things that I want to keep that I was cultivating in the plant stage of things. Let me dip my pinky toe into the water and try it and test it out and do a small scale experiment. Because one of the biggest things that'll happen when people are making career shifts is that they'll see something out there on the horizon and they'll say, oh my gosh, that sounds incredible. But then they won't do the little tests to ensure that it's going to be a good fit for them and to do the risk management. And they will just go straight into that next thing. So you might know somebody who, say, was a software developer. And they felt like, man, I really just don't have enough human interaction. I really wish I was working with people more in my job. So I'm going to go and be a teacher, or I'm going to go and be a social worker. And they jumped right into grad school. And then they graduated from grad school and walked out and thought, this does get me more of the people stuff, but I lost some of the things that I really wanted. And this doesn't quite feel like the right fit either. We don't want you to be going through your career with this sort of Goldilocks approach where you're only ever eating the porridge that's too cold or too hot. We want to use this pilot stage of things to do small scale tests to keep converging in on where's that just right bowl of porridge for you. So I'll give you an example of a pilot here with a quite literal situation with a pilot. So let me know in the chat box and in the comments if you have heard of Richard Branson and the founding story of Virgin Airways and how this came to be. It's one of these things that I feel like they talk about in business classes all the time. So Yasmin's like, of course, amazing, awesome. So for those of you who haven't heard of the story of how Virgin Airlines came to be, my understanding, I'm going to give you a very condensed version that's probably going to get some details wrong. Richard Branson wants to go on a tropical vacation, shows up at the airport to get on the plane to go on his tropical vacation, and the flight to get to said tropical destination has been canceled, and there are no other flights until the next morning. And Richard's pretty bummed, pissed off a little bit, and all the other customers who had shown up there at the airport just to find out that things had been canceled were none too pleased either. So he was quick thinking and said, you know what? I'm going to charter an airplane and fly it to wherever it was, Puerto Rico, somewhere like that. And just out of curiosity, I'm going to see if I can sell tickets to all these other stranded passengers so that we can all get to Puerto Rico sooner. So his pilot program was quite literally going person to person at the airport who was on that canceled flight and saying, hey, if you want to get there early, it's $90 for a ticket. I've got a chartered plane, happy to take you. And that was the beginning of how he started to build Virgin Airways. Just one flight, just one route. Obviously chartering a plane is not the smallest of small scale experiments that one could do, but it's a pretty small scale experiment as opposed to going out there and buying a fleet of 30 Boeing 747s. So that is how to think about the pilot stage of things. Small scale experiment, risk management, vetting and validating that the direction you think is interesting will actually turn out to be interesting for you in reality. And then the last stage of the pivot method is the pivot stage. And that's when you've gotten the data back that says, okay, this direction for my future makes a ton of sense. I like it, I'm excited about it, and I want to keep moving in this direction. And so you go all in to go all out and double down on making the transition into that thing. There's a question in the chat of, didn't Virgin Airlines go bankrupt? You know what? I don't remember whether or not Virgin Airlines went bankrupt. I believe that they got bought, but I don't know if it was a function of bankruptcy or not. But I mean, that's an excellent point about getting into a business model and getting into something and then not being able to do the pivot method and pivot and be agile, right? There are huge startup costs of running an airline. So again, it's another testament to thinking about how can I be adaptive and agile and continually thinking about what's my strategy for expanding into what's next that'll take care of me and keep me safe and protected. Yeah, great question. So now let me ask you all in the chat box here. So knowing this new pivot methodology, planting, so figuring out what you want, scanning, looking for opportunities, piloting, trying something out with a small scale experiment, or pivoting, which phase of the pivot method do you feel like you are in right now in your current employment situation, whether it's in your job or if you're unemployed, in the seeking what's next process? Kay Larson says scan phase for me. Sydney says plant. Awesome. Yasmin says plant. Marley says scan. A lot of people in plant, a lot of people in scan. Plant for Becca, plant for LaRusso, plant for Carrie. Awesome. And so one of the awesome things that we will be talking about here is if you're not in scan yet, if you're some of the planters, we'll talk about how to get you into scan. And if you're in scan, we're going to talk about how to pair that seeking opportunities and looking for opportunities with actually taking action to start moving yourself into that pilot phase so you can start to be getting some information. Middle of plant and scan for Jennifer, scan moving to pilot for Sheila. Awesome, awesome. Sheila, I might ask you to share a little bit of your example here in a minute to help inspire everybody on the webinar today. So let's specifically talk about the scanning phase here. And actually, I got a quick question from Victoria, which I will jump into. What if you have two separate options for scan that are vastly different? Victoria, that's a beautiful question. And I will actually, if it's okay with you, hold answering that for just a minute, because we're going to get into a little bit of that here too, with how to jump into the pilot phase from the scan phase. But we'll talk about the scan phase and then I'll come back. So ping me in the chat box if I don't remember to come back and answer your specific question there. So we're looking at the scan piece here. So remembering this ain't your daddy's job market, the old model of thinking about careers was essentially that you don't scan. You stick it out because you need your pension, and if you leave this organization, you got to start back over from the bottom, and that sucks. The old model had very limited information and human capital mobility, and the old model was essentially suck it up and make the best of your situation. Jobs aren't supposed to be fun. They call it work and not play for a reason. All those kinds of kind of cynical, kind of sad ways to think about what career and work can be. And the new model of thinking about how to scan is there are lots of opportunities to do research. There are lots of opportunities to explore available possibilities outside of your current role, department, organization, or industry. And that trying new things out is actually a really healthy, smart thing to be doing as you go. So let's talk about, for those of you who are in plant and wanting to move into scan, some of the strategies for getting yourself exposed to new ideas and trends that help you manage risk. Kay Larson says, suck it up. I hear that constantly. Must be a lot of unhappy people out there. Let me tell you. So the conference board does a study every single year of workplace satisfaction. And so this isn't even happiness, right? This isn't even engagement. This is just like, are you satisfied with your work? And the conference board just released their 2018 numbers because there's a year lag to it. And they were celebrating that satisfaction in work has come to a 20-year high of 54% of employees being satisfied. That blows my mind that we as a society feel like it's worth celebrating that we've gotten to 54% of people being satisfied with their job. And it was a 20-year high starting in 1999 and 2000, right around that age, or right around that year. Workplace satisfaction started to hover right around 50%. Sometimes it would be 48%, sometimes it'd be 51. But that means that 1 out of every 2 people that you meet is not satisfied in their work. And that sucks. And so I want to say to all of you that you should be super proud of yourselves for being here and equipping yourself with information and tools and resources for how to be part of the satisfied percent and not the dissatisfied percent. So good for you for taking responsibility and taking action to create the sort of career in life that you want. But let's come back to strategies for exposure to new ideas and trends that help you manage risks. So now I'm going to need some of your participation in the chat box here to get this brainstorm popping, because each of you is in a different industry, in a different role, and can contribute different ideas that might be relevant to your role, your organization, or your sector. But if we want to future-proof ourselves, we got to think about the places that robots are likely to come in and do things so that we can figure out where they're not likely to come in and do things. So let's start out with this question of what are the kinds of things that robots can do pretty easily? So what are things that are likely to be automated away, or maybe already are being automated away? You know, when I think about Tesla and self-driving cars, it's like driving transportation is being automated away at a pretty rapid pace here. So let me go check in with the chat box. If you haven't chimed in yet, please do, with what are the kinds of things that robots can do easily? Oh my gosh, look at all these great options. Elisa says they can do easily do repetitive tasks. Recruiting IB Mayor says the same thing. Debbie says data entry. Absolutely. Elisa says things that are linear. Yasmin says manual labor. Absolutely. Leah says customer service. And Leah, I think there's absolutely a piece of customer service that can be automated, but I think there's also a piece of customer service that feels really personalized and human, right? So I remember back when companies were getting their act together around providing more phone call support for web things. And a lot of companies thought that in order to save money, outsourcing those call centers to be in other countries could potentially be a really good cost savings. And while they were a cost savings, a lot of customers got really upset and frustrated because they were working with somebody who maybe didn't have the same grasp on the language and couldn't necessarily hear them and be empathetic and understand what they were truly asking. So I think there's an element of both, that there's some customer support in terms of troubleshooting that we're already watching companies automate through chatbots, right? I bet some of you have had experiences with customer support bots already, for sure. Focus says organizing and responding to humans. Becca says anything involving heavy lifting, for sure. Welding. Focus says math, some of it, absolutely. Data entry, computer tasks, emails for routine activities. Yeah, how many of you are users of Gmail and have noticed that Gmail, for some people, is rolling out this feature where it will predict what you want to say and it will auto fill in your email for you? It is wild to think about the amount of time that we spend on doing something that Gmail can predict out for us. Keikobo says some aspects of teachers. Absolutely, and teaching is another place where there is a really interesting mix of automatable stuff with digital courses that can be created, digital curriculums that can be created, and a deeply human element of understanding what does this particular learner need? What are they struggling with? What aren't they understanding? How can I best support them? We're seeing drones performing inspections on wind turbines, answering easy questions. Yeah, these are all things that robots can do easily. Things that are linear, things that are repetitive, things that don't require a lot of thoughtfulness and individualized attention, things where the same sorts of answers are able to be provided over and over again. So now let's flip gears and ask the other question. Well, actually, I'll show you this funny statistic, which is there is a website out there called willrobotstakemyjob.com. Go look at it after this webinar. And it lets you put in a specific job title, and then it gives you back a statistic of how likely it is that that will be automated away. I did my own self here as a vocational counselor. And luckily for me in my role, there's a less than 1% chance that it will be automated away in the soon future. But this is a fun thing to go poke around with and play, especially if you're trying to understand what are the qualities that make something more automatable or roboticized versus less. But let's take that exact same brainstorm we just did and let's flip it on its head to talk about what are the kinds of things that robots can't do as easily. Where does humanity your brain, your heart, your gut instinct, all of that have an advantage. And what kinds of problems need solving that haven't even been addressed or defined yet, right? A computer can totally do math problems when the problem has already been defined. You know, x plus 2 equals 5. Computer can for sure do that. But if we need somebody to define the problem, that's much more of a human level, creative thinking, not automatable process and task. All right, I'm going to jump back in. Oh my gosh, look at all these awesome things that are in the chat box. This is so great. So Lisa says, logical thinking that impacts people is something that robots can't do easily. So right. Compassion. Focus says, concepting creative ideas for multiple clients. Yeah, the idea of creative thinking, outside of the box thinking, pulling in other resources. That's absolutely something that robots can't do as easily. Stephanie says they cannot connect with people. Becca says empathy. Yeah, could you imagine a robot social worker? Could you imagine going to a robot therapist? For some of the easily automatable, repeatable tasks, maybe we can get away with a chatbot. But for some of that deep, heart-wrenching stuff, nothing but a human's going to do. LaRussa says mediation and conflict resolution. Absolutely. Reading the room, understanding different stakeholders' needs. Focus says that they can't respond authentically or emotionally. Yeah, at this point, that is beyond what typical robots can do for sure. Monica says, I read on LinkedIn that communication, creativity, and compassion are not going to be able to be done through AI. Yeah, those would be super hard to replicate, right? These are all amazing ideas. Yasmin says they can't strategize or develop roadmaps. Sydney says collaboration and brainstorming, understanding the real impact of ideas across levels, being there for students in school who need that deep pressure hug. Oh my gosh, yes. Brandy says, I hope chatbots never take over in HR. And again, HR might be a place where for some of the routine repetitive stuff, it might behoove us to have robots take over and have chatbots do some of those things. But for some of the deeper stuff, like my boss has been making misogynistic comments and I don't know what to do about that. Or I want to stay at this organization and I'm excited about this organization, but I need a different role because I'm feeling super bored. You need a human to guide you through that sort of thing. So these are all great. Sheila says life coaching. Love that. Appreciate you, Sheila. Totally. So take a moment to think about of some of the things that everybody has been generously and thoughtfully contributing in the chat box and what we've been talking about here. Which of these elements could you lean into a little bit more in your own career? And how could you start to do a little bit of scanning, if you will, to start identifying where you might be able to find opportunities to pull a little bit more strategic thinking, more creativity, more compassion, more big picture stuff, any of that into the way that you are operating in your current role, or ways that you might be able to expand and grow into new and different roles. I'll say too that if anybody here has read Daniel Pink's book, A Whole New Mind, I, spoiler alert, have not read this book yet, but I read a summary of this book, which essentially says that all the things that we just talked about now are things that he goes into deep in this book about why all these creative, compassionate, collaborative, strategic ways of thinking haven't necessarily been rewarded as much in the economy up until this point. But when the robots are coming, these are the kinds of things that actually differentiate us and keep us having a distinct advantage, and that will, as he says, allow us to rule the future. Now, let's talk a little bit more about future proofing here. One thing to think about, and I was an economics major in college, so I feel like I have to bring in a little bit econ speak at some point in every session that I teach. One thing to think about is diversification. So don't put all of your career, happiness, or identity eggs all in one basket, right? So if you are somebody who is teaching 6th grade English and literature, that's a pretty narrow space to be if that's the only way that you think about yourself. But if you think about ways to diversify your knowledge, skills, and relationships, maybe you'll think about, well, what are the other things that 6th graders need? How can I be teaching them about other life skills? Maybe I have a real passion for some of the kids who have different capabilities, and making lesson plans and coming up with ways to include them in conversations. Even just that small of a pilot can help for you to expand your capabilities, expand the value that you bring to the table, and make it so that if, God forbid, your school closed or you needed to move across the country, you would be a more interesting and compelling candidate for future roles, and that you could do things, again, that robots can't do because of thinking about yourself in a little bit more of an expansive and broad context. So if you've got ideas for this for yourself already, go ahead and pop them into the chat box of how you could be actively diversifying your knowledge, your skills, and your relationships. Even if it's just a teeny baby step of exploring this thing that I've been curious about, or listening to this podcast on something that I've been intrigued about that I'm seeing as a trend in the industry. And Kubit is saying, my research and analysis skills have been extremely useful in all the jobs I've had. Yeah, absolutely. Volunteering for cross-functional projects is a great idea, Sydney. Yeah, exposing yourself to new and different things just so you've got that knowledge is so helpful and so important. So here is the bottom line for future-proofing yourself. Intentionally expose yourself to new ideas, new people, and new skill sets. Whether that turns into a side hustle, deep friendships, a new job, or something else, it will absolutely serve you. And the bottom line is that if you pick a strategic direction you want to evolve in and grow your career, you can take control over your destiny and future-proof your path if you're taking action. And once you get clear on what you want and develop a strategy to get it, you'll never need to worry about safety or security in your work because you'll be unstoppable at creating the type of work that you want. And now, Jennifer, I want to make sure to come back to your question here about, what if I've been doing scan and I have two very divergent ideas and interests? And so if we go back to the pivot method and we think about that pilot piece, one of the biggest and most important tenets of trying a pilot is that it should be a baby step. It should be dipping your pinky toe in the water. It should be easy and small and fun. So if you have two different divergent directions that you are interested in from that scanning, my best recommendation to you is to think about how you could dip your toe in the water of each. Don't put any artificial limitations on yourself, to say, I can only do one of these or I can only do the other one. The goal is to let yourself be creative and experimental and not to put huge pressure on it to have to be the one true perfect right thing to solve all your career woes. And just be playful and creative and just let yourself try things. Because what you might discover when you let yourself do a little taste test of one and a little taste test of the other is that A, you only like one of them and don't really like the other one. So you'll start to see how they stack up relative to one another when you get that experiential knowledge. 2, you'll find out you like both of them, and then you'll take a little further of a baby step with each of them to see if you can either create that distinction or start to see ways you might be able to bring the two together to converge. Or 3, you might do your baby step trials in the pilot part and hate both of them. And I mean, shoot, isn't that a great outcome? Because then if I had gone into either one of these things, I would have been miserable. I would have felt trapped. I would have felt so frustrated. Thank goodness that I got this data early to help me see, okay, this direction for growing into and moving into actually is not going to be fun. Or I thought that this was going to be a fabulous direction for me, and it's not actually very future-proofed. Like one of the things that on willrobotstakemyjob.com, which I found to be really interesting, is that there's some jobs in the health field that are super duper safe, and there are some jobs in the health field that are about to disappear. I think it's a phlebotomist is something that they believe is going to be automated within the next 10 to 20 years completely. So allowing yourself to take a step in that direction will get you that data of, do I like this? Does it seem like this field is growing? Is this a place that I feel like would be a fun spot for me to go and hang out and learn for the next 2 to 10 years? So taking those steps of actually trying it out, doing a taste test, seeing how it feels, and getting the experiential data is the only way that we get the affirmation and validation of what we think we like is actually what we're going to like doing. So Jennifer, great question, and thank you for posing that. With people's fear of needles, it's kind of terrifying. I hear you there. love and Boren's comment about, in my career, I have many different directions I could go with my degree. I'm currently in one specific area, but I keep up on training and learning on the others, so I could easily move those directions if I choose to. You are future-proofing yourself and taking the pivot method super seriously. So that's an awesome way to be thinking. And Sheila, if you were still on, I would love to hear a little bit more about what your pilot idea is and what you're moving forward with, to see if it'll offer up any additional inspiration or motivation for people who have been listening and trying to think about where they might go when they're ready to make a pilot. If you're still in the plant stage, don't be thinking about making a pilot just yet. Your mission is purely just to dip your toe into the scan and see what's possible, see what's out there. Let yourself do some research, play with ideas, use some of the great thought work that we've done in this session to have conversations with other people in your field or with friends and family that love you and want the best for you. All sorts of good stuff like that. And Sheila, if you're feeling a little bit shy, that's also fine too. No worries. Oh, yay, Sheila, awesome. So Sheila says, I'm up-leveling my skills to digital marketing. What a cool thing to do. And for different types of pilots, there are tons of different ways to execute this, right? You can take a free class on a place like edX, Udemy, Coursera. You can take a paid class at places like Skillshare, General Assembly, or at a local community college. You can go do a whole degree program if you want to, but education doesn't have to be the only path there. You can also start getting your hands dirty. You know, if you want to learn digital marketing, you might be better off just starting a blog, starting a Medium page, starting an Instagram handle, and playing with it and trying it to see what works, than going after traditional education. You know, if you want to be a thought leader in the world of, let's say, experiential education, let's say that you're a special education teacher. I'm actually thinking of a specific client I've had in the past. She was a special ed teacher. She loved experiential education, and she wanted to be able to start pivoting and growing in that direction and adding that to her diversified portfolio. So she started a podcast on experiential education. She didn't have to be an expert when she started it. She was documenting her learning journey of speaking to other experts in the field, getting a better understanding of different methodologies, seeing what works and doesn't work, talking about the data. And through that, she was able to use that to manage her own pivot and transition, which was awesome. Sheila, I love that you're starting a vlog too, and that you're building a portfolio. Yeah, having proof that you can do what you say you can do is such an important thing to show future employers, to future-proof yourself and diversify and allow yourself to feel like you are as in control of your destiny as you possibly can be. Now, there's one more thing I wanted to make sure to talk about, and then I'll throw the mic back here to Sam in just a second. But I also want to make sure that nobody leaves this session without remembering that if more information was the answer, we'd all be billionaires with perfect abs, right? So if you have been loving this information and you have been absorbing it, taking notes, thinking about this for yourself, I don't want you to stop there. So I'll also make this offer to you that if you want support to apply this to make a transformation happen and future-proof yourself, I'd love to be available for a conversation. I, as a career change coach, support people with thinking about this kind of thing all the time, whether it's with actually working with them or giving them ideas on resources, programs, etc. So if you'd love to snap up a time to have a conversation about future-proofing and navigating your own career pivot, that's a link to my calendar, which I can go ahead and pop into the chat box after we get back to the end here. But also, I've helped more than 500 people make changes, so I know what sorts of questions to ask you to get you moving. And here's some of the places where folks that I have worked with have gone. So if you've enjoyed this and you want help with the taking action part, I've opened up 8 spots on my calendar for folks if you would like to talk. And if you want to do this on your own and rock it out too, more power to you. But I know there are probably some of you who are on the session today who know I get better results, and I get results when I create accountability for myself, or when I have a sounding board or a thought partner, or the people in my life have a conflict of interest and they are not going to be able to give me an honest, unbiased perspective on what's going on in the world. So if you would be interested in having that conversation, you can go to getcareerclarity.com/connect and check out what is still left for conversations on my calendar. But I'd love to talk to you. Obviously, as you could tell from this session, I geek out over this stuff. I think it's so fun. And as a person who is championing a healthier, happier, more sustainable workforce, anything that I can do to help support people in making that happen is definitely on my to-do list. But with that, If you are just interested in getting in touch afterwards, please feel free to shoot me an email too. But with that, I will throw the mic back over to Sam at Fairygodboss, so that if we have any other questions, comments, etc. that folks want to have addressed, we can totally tackle those.
Thank you so much, Lisa. This was a really great presentation. If you have any questions, please leave them in the Q&A or the chat. I'll make sure we get to them. I know somebody asked about your online ebook. Just a note, we will be including a link to it in the email that we send up to everybody who registered, so you'll get that. But Lisa, if you also want to tell them the URL again, that might be helpful.
Yes, I am going to go ahead and put the URL for my calendar right into the chat in case anybody wants that. But if you want to get to the ebook itself, you can either go to getcareerclarity.com, and there is a couple of different places to download it there. Or if you go to getcareerclarity.com/4-pillars, it's the ebook all about the 4 pillars of career satisfaction.
Perfect. And again, we'll be including all those links. So if you didn't catch them, they'll be coming to you by the end of the day. So we had a question come in from Ella. She said, where would self-study for industry certification fall in the cycle?
Love that. So I think that if it is self-study for industry certification in the place that you are already working, then that could fall, it falls as a pilot, but I think you are the person who knows whether that is a pilot that is helping you to stay in your current swim lane and helping to make you more qualified in your current swim lane, or if it's a pilot that's helping you expand out of your current swim lane. So some people will seek out a professional certification because it'll open up a new promotion opportunity for them. They're already working as a project manager, and when they get their PMP certification, then they'll be able to get a pay raise, something else like that. That's fabulous. But if you are thinking about wanting to expand yourself in a different direction, you might want to think about, are there certifications for project management in a new or different industry that you could take and get exposed to that then give you a little bit more diversification and leverage externally?
That's a good point to make. Love that. I also want to make a note that Lisa does have a group on Fairygodboss. So if you don't have a question right now or you think of something later, you can always go there to connect with her as well. I'm about to send the link in the chat, so feel free to go join her group there. Anybody else? Oh, Ella said thank you, by the way.
Oh yeah, you're so welcome, Ella.
I think we've about answered all the questions for right now. So thank you again, Lisa. I think this is a great presentation and I learned a lot. I know that.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. And I think I saw one last question come through from Monica, who's talking about a friend who's seeking to transform into tech as a profession after 20 years as an educator. And I think that is an awesome thing to do. And Monica, one thing to help her think about too is that pilot stage is going to be so important for her to dip her pinky toe into. What does education look like? And education is actually one of the fields where it is the easiest to do a pilot, because most public schools have pretty straightforward policies around coming in and shadowing people. So you can effectively go and see what a day in the life is like to do exactly the job that you want to do, to get the sense of, would this be fun for me? Would this classroom management be something that I like? Do I want to take my tech ideas and transfer them over into a new world? And let me say too, that for somebody who has a deep experience in tech, if that person's interested in merging together education and tech into one, there are lots of cool ways to do that too, whether it's being an instructor at a place like General Assembly or Skillshare, or if it is potentially thinking about where people are wanting to specialize in their education career, where they need some of that tech information, like community colleges, trade schools, even traditional university programs can be great places to look and think about how to bring those two pieces together, and maybe even audit a class as your pilot step to do that risk management to see if that makes sense for you. Also,
Awesome.
Monica, you sound like a great friend. So way to be awesome.
Yeah, really. Thank you for doing that for your friend. That's really nice. I'm definitely forwarding your group to her now. Oh, look at these. Okay, so it looks like a lot of people are just saying thank you right now. So thank you again for everybody for joining us. And thank you again, Lisa. Really appreciated your time here with us today.
It is a pleasure. Thank you again, Sam. And for any of you who want to make sure that you are doing work that lights you up and that feels good and that is future-proof and that you are taking control over your career, I am so grateful for you being here, for consuming this information, and for equipping yourself. Because like we talked about, While information is not the only step, information is a really important first step.
Exactly. So thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your day. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll catch you at the next one. Bye.